Sebastian Langston, one of the foremost figures in the Space Science Council, was known for his meticulous approach and courage in leading daring missions. His influence reached the Council's most critical decisions, and now he was the one preparing for a mission himself. With the winter season settling in the far reaches of space, the Council had agreed on the importance of studying the nature of extraterrestrial ice formations. The theory that had captivated scientists for years was that space ice wouldn't melt for an entire month if exposed to open air on Earth. To verify this, Sebastian had been chosen to bring back a sample. Meticulous as always, Sebastian spent days preparing for his journey. The night before departure, he received a comprehensive report from his colleagues with recommendations and notes, and he carefully documented every location he needed to visit. Understanding the extreme cold of deep space, he made sure to wear the most insulated, cutting-edge coat available, engineered to withstand temperatures far below anything found on Earth. After packing his gear and checking his equipment, he was ready. The voyage was long and arduous, and Sebastian finally arrived at his destination. Upon setting foot on the icy surface, he was instantly struck by the unforgiving cold. Even through his specialized gear, the chill pierced his body. He couldn't believe it despite his years of experience in extreme environments. This cold was beyond anything he had ever encountered. His breath condensed in thick clouds, and the sheer intensity of the environment began to weigh on him. Determined to stay focused, Sebastian surveyed the area and approached one of the larger ice formations. He struck it with his foot, expecting it to break or at least show some signs of fracture, but it didn't budge. Intrigued, he started to walk further, his eyes scanning for suitable ice samples, but something unusual caught his eye. In the distance, amid the vast, bleak landscape, there was a figure barely visible. As he approached, he realized, with growing disbelief, that it was a woman lying on the icy ground, dressed in only a bra and underwear, as if caught in some cruel punishment. The stark contrast of her vulnerability against the brutal cold shocked him. Who could have left her here, and why? Instinctively, he rushed to her side. "Are you okay?" he asked urgently, kneeling beside her. She opened her eyes weakly, her lips trembling. "Please, help me. I'm so cold," she managed to whisper. Without hesitation, Sebastian wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close in an attempt to warm her up. Her skin was like ice, and her body was on the verge of freezing completely. He looked into her eyes, desperate to understand what had happened. "How did you end up here?" "I was sent here, as punishment," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "Please, I can't survive out here much longer." "What did you do to deserve such a punishment?" Sebastian asked, incredulous. "Who would do this to you?" The woman's body trembled violently, her teeth chattering as she spoke. "My commander. He found out I was trying to escape to Earth. He sent me here to freeze." Sebastian felt a surge of anger at the thought of someone being so ruthlessly punished. "I won't let you die out here," he promised. "I'm taking you with me. We're getting out of here." Just as he moved to remove his coat and offer it to her, she reached up, stopping him with surprising strength. "Don't. If you take it off, you'll freeze too," she warned, her voice filled with genuine fear. "Our bodies run hotter than humans. If you give me your coat, you'll die in minutes." Understanding the risk, Sebastian nodded. "All right, I'll keep it on. Just hold on. I'll keep you warm until we get back to the ship." Lara's eyes softened, and she leaned her head against his chest, too weak to resist the embrace or the warmth that seeped into her freezing bones. He adjusted his hold, supporting her weight, as she struggled to stay conscious. Sebastian could feel her trembling intensify, her breath shallow and rapid, as if she were on the edge of losing her grip on reality. The frigid air was biting, cutting into his exposed skin as he shielded her as best he could. Sebastian looked down at her, noting her weakened state, and gently tightened his grip. "Just a little longer, Lara. Stay with me." His voice was steady, a lifeline she clung to amid the vast emptiness of space. Each step he took was careful, calculated. As he navigated the icy terrain back to his ship, he was acutely aware of the weight in his arms and the fragility of the person he was carrying. I didn't think anyone would come," she murmured, barely audible. "Well, it looks like you're lucky," he replied softly, glancing at her with a faint, reassuring smile. "I've been told I have a habit of showing up where I'm needed." She gave a small, tired smile, but her eyes closed again, her body sagging in his arms. Sebastian felt a pang of worry. The last stretch to his ship seemed endless, and every second mattered now. When he finally reached the entrance, he shifted her weight carefully to press the access panel, allowing the doors to slide open with a hiss. The controlled, warmer air inside hit them immediately. He stepped in quickly, the door closing behind them, and laid her gently on a padded bench. Her face was still pale, her lips a faint shade of blue, her breathing shallow. Sebastian hurried to adjust the temperature, increasing the warmth. He grabbed a blanket from a storage compartment, then sat beside her, wrapping her up and rubbing her hands, urging her blood to circulate. "Lara," he called, keeping his voice soft but firm, "I need you to stay with me. We're safe now, we're heading to Earth." Her eyes fluttered open, locking onto his, though her gaze was still distant, as if her mind was slowly returning from some frozen nightmare. "Earth," she whispered, her voice strained. "I always wanted to see it." "You'll see it soon," he assured her. "We're almost on our way." A faint glimmer of relief appeared in her expression, and she exhaled a long, unsteady breath, her muscles loosening slightly as she nestled into the warmth of the blanket. Sebastian sat with her, waiting as her breathing steadied. Gradually, color returned to her cheeks, and her shivering eased. After a while, Sebastian felt her relax, her head resting gently on his shoulder. The silence between them was thick with unspoken questions, the memories of the brutal cold outside a vivid reminder of the narrow escape they'd just had. He was curious about this stranger who had been exiled in such a desolate place, and as she regained her strength, he wondered what story she held, what had brought her to the edge of space and nearly to the end of her life. He looked at her thoughtfully. "Lara, why did you try to escape?" Her gaze was fixed on her hands, which she held close to her chest as if guarding a fragile part of herself. She took a deep breath. "My world, it's controlled by fear. By rules that punish any desire for freedom." Her voice grew firmer, laced with bitterness. "All I wanted was a chance to live on my own terms. To see Earth, to experience something beyond the rigid expectations I've always known." Sebastian listened, sensing the depth of her pain, the wounds that went beyond the cold of space. "You don't have to go back," he said softly. "Earth can be your new beginning." Lara glanced at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Would they really allow me to stay?" "Yes," he replied confidently. "You'll be safe here, and I'll make sure of it." Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the loneliness that had surrounded both of them seemed to dissolve. Lara reached for his hand, a tentative gesture, as if unsure if she could trust the hope his words offered. But Sebastian's steady grip reassured her, a silent promise that she was no longer alone. After securing the ship for the journey, he initiated takeoff, setting the course back to Earth. As they ascended, the vastness of space stretched around them, an endless sea of stars and distant galaxies. Lara watched in awe, her face illuminated by the faint glow of the cockpit lights. "I've never seen space like this," she murmured, almost to herself. "Not with a future waiting at the end of it." Sebastian glanced over, a small smile on his face. "There's a lot of beauty in it, and you'll get to see all of it without fear." The journey was long, and as the hours passed, Lara drifted in and out of sleep, the warmth of the ship finally thawing the last remnants of the icy terror she had endured. She began to open up to Sebastian, telling him stories of her world, its rigid laws, and the punishments for anyone who dared to defy them. He listened intently, understanding now the depth of her relief at being free from that life. When they finally entered Earth's atmosphere and descended to the surface, Sebastian landed the ship near his home. The transition from the cold, sterile air of space to the fresh, invigorating atmosphere of Earth was exhilarating, and Lara's eyes lit up as she took in the landscape. He guided her inside, showing her around his modest home, the familiarity of it comforting after the isolation of her former life. "You're safe here," he assured her once again, watching as she took it all in with a quiet sense of wonder. "Thank you, Sebastian," she said, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "You didn't have to do any of this. Everyone deserves a chance," he replied simply. "And I have a feeling your story isn't over yet." That night, as Sebastian prepared to study the ice sample he'd brought back, he noticed Lara watching him from across the room. Her expression was serene, a newfound peace on her face now that she was far from the desolate cold of space. Her body, so tense and exhausted when he first found her, was finally at ease, relaxed in the warmth of his home on Earth. He carefully placed the ice in a sunlit corner of his kitchen, wondering if the old legends about space ice were true rumors, that it was unlike any ice on Earth and could last a month without melting. He felt an odd sense of excitement mixed with curiosity as he set up a small notebook beside it, ready to record any observations he might find over the coming days. Turning, he found Lara still watching him, a small smile on her face. "You look so focused," she said with a soft chuckle. "I guess this is what you're like on a mission." Sebastian returned her smile. "Maybe a little," he admitted. "This ice could change everything we know about the nature of water in the universe. But right now," he added, his voice softening, "it's not the most important discovery in the room." Lara's cheeks flushed slightly at his words, and she looked away, a faint smile still on her lips. The bond between them had grown over their journey, but now that they were here, safe and together, there was a new, unspoken warmth filling the space between them. Finally, after everything they'd endured, they were here, able to simply be with each other, without fear or urgency. As Sebastian finished his notes, he noticed Lara shiver slightly. The weight of her journey, both physically and emotionally, was starting to settle in. He walked over, extending a hand to her. "Come on," he said gently, "you could probably use a good night's rest." She took his hand, and they headed to the bedroom, where she gratefully lay down on the bed, pulling a heavy blanket around her. Sebastian watched her, noting how at ease she looked now that she was finally warm and safe. "Is it strange for you?" he asked, settling on the edge of the bed beside her. "To be here after everything you've been through?" Lara met his eyes, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "It's surreal. I feel like I should be worrying, or preparing to run again. But right now, I don't want to be anywhere else." Sebastian felt a warmth in his chest at her words. He reached over, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're free now, Lara. This can be your new home if you want it to be." Her eyes softened, a look of gratitude and something more in them. She reached up, placing her hand gently on his. "I'd like that." They shared a long, quiet gaze, and in that moment, everything around them faded. Sebastian leaned down slowly, his face close to hers, as if waiting for her permission. She smiled, a silent acceptance, and he closed the distance, their lips meeting in a tender kiss that spoke of gratitude, relief, and a promise of something deeper. As the night grew darker, they stayed close, sharing stories of their worlds, of the past, and of hopes they hadn't dared to speak aloud. Slowly, their words grew fewer, replaced by an unspoken understanding as they held each other close. The warmth of their embrace banished the last remnants of cold that had clung to Lara, melting away the fear that had haunted her. With Sebastian's arms wrapped around her, she finally closed her eyes, her breathing steady and relaxed. He watched her fall asleep, feeling an unexpected contentment he hadn't known in years. The ice in the kitchen might have held mysteries of the universe, but in that moment, Sebastian knew the real discovery was lying here beside him, in the quiet safety they had both found in each other's arms.